Drywall is its own craft, and it's a craft that's underappreciated by most folks, even people in the trades, right up until the time you need it. Drywall is a cross between carpentry and masonry, between the skills of a framer and the skills of a concrete finisher. And just as in those two trades, it's work. It's hard work, with the opportunity to grow and advance and wear yourself out and sometimes make real money. So we just switched to 5/8, 4 by 12 by 5/8, a little harder to get up, and we're running out of room. Let's see if we can get them in here on the floor.
I hear you. No, you're doing good.
Now, as you watch these men work, ask yourself, have I ever met anyone truly happy, truly fulfilled, truly loved and respected that wasn't a hard worker? Because I haven't, and I bet you haven't either. So the next big question you might ask yourself as you watch these guys sweat and produce good work is, can I approach work with this kind of attitude? Can I learn to be hungry for the work? Can I learn to be a hard worker if I'm not one already? Because if you want to be one of those respected, fulfilled, happy people, somehow you've just got to learn to love to work. So how long have you been doing this?
4 years. Something like that.
You guys been working together pretty much 4 years?
No, I just came back this year. Worked here for 2 years, 3 years, most of my high school prior, and then I left for 4 years to go to North River and weld.
Okay. So let me ask you this. How come you're not welding today on this 103-degree day and you said you're carrying rock in? What pushed you back away from welding and fabrication into stocking construction?
Well, my grandfather needed help, and I didn't like the position I was in with the job I was working.
So you had the freedom to change.
So I changed it.
You gonna ride this horse for a while?
I don't know.
You're not as young as you used to be.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost 20, but
Well, you're plenty young. You can do this for 10 more years.
oh yeah,
But not much longer than that.
probably.
Yeah. And you guys may not realize it, but there's not a lot of guys your age that can work like this. Hang in there, man.
It's good to see you again.
Keep burning that rod. That's a good skill.
I know it.
How many hours you can just keep them into something?
Yeah.
You just gotta keep
Yeah,
working.
that's right. Installing this garage door before the drywall was installed was a mistake that I just had to make, because the building had to be finished from the outside because of how slow we were going and the weather we had to deal with and security issues. So we went ahead and did it, even though it made the drywall a lot tougher. It not only slowed up the hanging, but the taping as well, and then on top of that, it created a situation where it would be so easy to accidentally damage this door or the opener or the rails while the work was being done. So it's not fun for these guys, but Darin Sutton is not afraid of a challenge. Watch the way he's leading this crew. By the way, these young guys are framers, and they work together, and they pulled off a day from their schedule to come over and help Darin with this ceiling and these tall walls. But just watch the way he's leading this whole effort. He's everywhere. He's up and he's down and he's taking the measurements, and he's smooth and he's smart, and all the while he was keeping up a steady, good-natured banter with these guys, which is part of working with guys that you respect. And watching him do this reminds me of something that I read by Hugh Nibley in an essay entitled Leaders to Managers, The Fatal Shift. The idea is that men can never be managed into battle. They must be led. And a true leader marches the same march, he eats the same food, he sleeps on the same dirt, and he's the first one over the wall. My observation over the years is that bosses are thick on the ground, but a good leader is hard to find and is a treasure. This backyard shop has certainly shown the advantages of scaffolding. There's a world of difference between working up off the ground and working up off the ground on a platform. It's the way to go if you can afford it. There was a comment on the channel a couple weeks ago from Sweden, and he was saying that in Sweden, and we've noticed that scaffolding is everywhere and it's mandated by law in Europe, it's turned into a scam because in his case, the cost to rent or buy the scaffold was more than the cost of the material itself for a roof renovation. So it's always, the cost-benefit calculation, the risk-reward calculation. How much risk are you willing to take, and how much can you afford to spend to reduce it? Well, Darin's going to finish this up today as far as hanging it. The project went great. The hanging portion. He'll start taping tomorrow, maybe this afternoon, and we'll kind of dive deep on that. But in general, fine job, not much waste. He was a little short on 5/8. These kinds of blemishes are filled with hot mud. You'll watch him do that. They make no difference at all. A stairway like this is, as we anticipated, difficult, but doable. And this is the office. Certainly adequate. Pretty well lit. Darin does great. Just great. And let me point one thing out about one of the comments that happens a lot. That he does use nails for hanging. Quite often. And he's good at it. And he also does his own taping and texturing, which means that nobody is tuned in to nail pops and callbacks more than the guy who does the tape and texturing and whose reputation is on the line. So it makes me wonder why, in some cases, nails pop so regularly, and in some cases, they don't. See this? You hold your sheets back just a little bit at the corners so that nothing sticks out and intrudes into the space that the corner bead needs. An example of allowable tolerance is vastly different between hanging rock and hanging siding. So let me ask you this.
Yes,
Why
sir.
do nails have such a bad rep?
It's operator.
Yeah.
You ever tore off a piece of sheetrock from a house hung 50 years ago with it's all nailed? Mm-hmm. You can't hardly pull that thing off the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just the materials.
So you're saying that the head of the nail gets a better bite onto the paper of the rock than a screw that punches through it?
Yeah, I would think so. I think it really becomes, a preference. I have the ability. My best thing when I first started this trade was the days I got to use my hammer.
Yeah.
When I showed up and there was wood, that's the way I was taught.
Yeah.
So we nailed things, and that's just kind of what I've gone through. I think there's more control with your hammer.
Yeah, with where it comes to rest.
Exactly. I can run that nail at that angle and finish it flat. A screw, you start to try to toenail, it's got to set at that angle.
And it's tearing all the way through,
Yeah,
or it's leaving the
or
edge
it's
sticking
gonna-
out.
It's going to stay out. So
So people don't realize that the edge of those drywall nails is soft enough that you can make it conform to whatever
yeah,
the
it's
substrate is.
It's made to compress. You can see that.
And hold mud.
And it's just, there's a technique to it. A flat hammer and a small dimple. They don't have to be blowed in there. They just got to be flat.
So one of the interesting things in the comments has been the controversy between screws and nails. And who can deny that there can be sloppy work done with either fastener, right?
Absolutely.
And so is it easier to train a man to run a screw gun or run a hammer?
A screw gun.
A screw gun. Anybody can pick up a screw gun and fasten.
Yeah.
But it takes hours and
It
years.
takes a lot of practice, and a good finisher. I mean, a lot of times the finishers are the ones that get you to stop using nails, is because you beat it all up. The nails and the screw things, I think it's whatever people are comfortable with, but I'm comfortable with nails, and it's an accountability thing. I hang and I finish my own stuff, so I'm over all of it. There's things that are missed and there's things that are damaged, but as I transfer from a hanger to a finisher, well, now I'm cleaning up those things that might not have went together, the nail that blew out, or the screw that popped.
Sure. Or the corner that was broken. It's a judgment call. Does it save me time to fix that when I hang it or fix it when I tape it?
Yeah. Once it gets to the wall, it transfers to the finisher.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. Now we got to fix what's there.
Perfect. So they have those collated screw guns that'll just shoot. I don't see you using those.
I've seen them. I think it just comes down to cost.
Money.
I'm old school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stuck in my ways.
Sure.
I like to do the same things, I guess.
Yep.
But I think most of it is cost.
Yeah.
It is cost.
Yeah, because those things cost money, and then the screws are more expensive, and you break down more often,
Yeah.
and. So years ago in Las Vegas, I was thrown in with a bunch of drywallers, just to kind of fill in when I worked for Martin Harris, as I remember. And their measurements, it was like this: 42.3, 49.7, 16.2 on the over. And I'm thinking, what kind of a lingo is this? Tell these people what they were talking about when they were doing that.
Well, we just measure an eighth of an inch.
Hear that?
So,
within an eighth of an inch, it's close enough. So give us the example.
Yeah, like 42 and 1 right here is what I'm cutting, is 42 and an eighth. We'll use heavy, we'll use weak, but for the most part, it's up to an eighth.
An eighth of an inch, because the mud fills an eighth of an inch and you need it sometimes.
And to be honest, most of the time the framings, you gotta find a happy medium between the top and the bottom.
That's right.
This piece right here in that staircase, pretty consistent, but it wasn't perfect from top to bottom.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. So now let me follow up. So he had some boys in here first day hanging this lid, and those guys were framers primarily, right?
Yes, sir.
So he wasn't trying to teach them the lingo, and he switched over to using conventional carpenter measurements, 3/4, ½ inch. I didn't hear any 7/16, but it's just not worth investing the time to teach the new language, right?
Yeah, those guys have had a little experience with me, but that's what they were giving me numbers, so I turned it into my they gave me a number and I adjusted it all.
After all, he was interested in getting it done,
Yes.
not in changing a
They
mentality.
were here for the heavy lifting.
Yes. And they did good.
Absolutely. A young group of kids, early 20s, that have branched out and framing on their own. It's not perfect, but they're learning.
Yeah.
They're learning how to get jobs done.
And you could tell they were here to work. They were here to work.
Yep.
Anyway, he's just about battled this into submission. He's going to get out his mud pan and his knives here in a little bit, and we'll get some footage and get some detail from him on that. So I was gone for 2 days, and I rolled in here last night. It was about dark to see how this guy done, and he spanked it. You've been taping. Yesterday was like 2.5 days. Yesterday was.
Yeah, I started Tuesday, stricken tape.
Yeah. So you got to think about this. I mean, he rolls in here with some help one day and busts the lid out, and then hangs for 2 more days.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I guess Friday I finished up little loose ends down here, and then Monday I did the upstairs.
Yeah. So that's darn good. There's 4,000 feet of drywall in here, 1,200 feet of ceilings, most of it 16 feet off the ground. Do you always kind of shiver when you come into a little room like this with a high ceiling, or is it all the same?
No, well, I'm getting older, so I think about it, but they're just a challenge. It's just
figured it out.
A lot of big space.
A lot of big space.
That's why we use 12s.
That's why we use 12s, yeah. But I'll tell you what, when you're 65 and you walk in here and you watch a young guy doing this, you think, you know, I don't know if I ever could have even carried this guy's water. But he's got, so we're just fire taping in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell people what fire tape means in a garage or a shop.
Well, most of it is just to stop draft. We're going to try to stop the transfer of air between two rooms. And in this particular...
For fire. If you stop the draft, you stop the fire.
We can slow it down. In this particular shop, since there is living space above here, 5/8 on the ceiling, 5/8 on the firewall, gives you plenty of time to escape if there is a... Slows it down.
Bail out of
So if we can stop the air transfer between the walls, we can slow a fire down.
The second half of that is it doesn't get the attention to detail on the finish. It's just a life safety finish. And it's good enough for a shop, right? So it's one coat and then right over with the tape and then just string it on there.
Yep, just getting it on there. You know, when you're leaving it, this is what it's gonna be. So I do the same things as if I was gonna finish it. I pre-filled everything, I cut everything out, you know, to make sure that we're leaving as clean a job as we can.
Yeah, for the money. There's an agreed on price, and it's more for more work and less for less work. But his comment about pre-filling, not everybody does that. But he goes through and he V's out the joints and he hot muds any of the broken corners.
Broken corners, what you get a lot of.
You got to have that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we're very happy with that and the productivity. Now we're going to go up and give one little overview of what's going on in the office, the living space, which is a different level of finish because it is living space. Let's go upstairs.
This Columbia Fat Boy box, thought it was a great idea, but it's heavy.
Oh,
it's like wielding Thor's hammer right here. And I'm not even kidding. If you push this thing around all day, you'll know it.
yeah, because it's got
It just holds more mud, and that's really the ticket.
8 or 10 pounds of mud in there.
So, and they're adjustable. Basically, the adjustment pushes on this blade, which this blade will deflect. If the joint is really crowned, you want to take that blade out of it.
And it'll conform a little bit?
Yeah, it's going to put less mud on in the center, and a little more on the outside. So if it's a little the other way, you can tighten it up, and this will put, the more you tighten it up, the less mud that it's going to put on.
Cool.
And to thin that, I kind of run them right in the middle, unless the joint tells you otherwise.
Okay. There's 20 pounds of mud.
There it is. Off the wall and put it on the wall. Right there.
All right, so it's been a couple days. Darin went off and cleaned up a little texture job in another place. He has to keep multiple plates spinning like every contractor. And nobody understands that just because they've hired a contractor, he doesn't live his whole life on that job, because in order to have a steady workflow, you got to have several things going, right?
You gotta have a lot of irons in the fire.
You got to have irons in the fire, and it's possible to have too many. Any blacksmith can tell you that.
Yes.
But Darin, talk to us about how many times you go over this, you hang it, and then what I mean, how many times do you touch every square foot of this?
At least, I call them laps. I mean, I make a lap at least 4 times around the entire space. We've taped it. We've, I guess you can even back that up, because we cut and pre-fill it. Then once it's cut and pre-filled, we tape. Then I double. Then we flush it, and then we touch it up.
Okay, double means what?
Second coat. That's the first coat of mud over the tape.
Okay, flush it means what?
That's the second coat over. So you've gone from a 10 to a 12-inch box. Now your butts are starting to come together. There's 2 coats on the butts. There are 2 coats on the flats. So right here, I like to clean up the corners, and now I can coat the angles. We do 1 coat over the tape on the angles, and that always suffices.
Let's roll in here. So you do 1 coat over the tape on the angles or corners.
And that just will pull the flush coat together. Once the angles start getting coated, we're starting to be finished up. We're down to the nitty gritty at that point, where we're touching up little scratches. You're finding the little spots that are missed.
And then just sand it off one time. You're
Sand
watching
it all
for any.
off. We'll brush things down here a little bit before I hand coat the butts. But other than that, we should have a real minimal sand job tomorrow once everything's dry.
Perfect. It sure looks good, man. We're looking forward to what this looks like. And we'll talk to you one more time before Jim shoots a texture on it.
Okay.
So do it yourself. We're always tempted to fix our own drywall. Maybe hang a little bit and then tape and texture. And one of the first questions you run into when you walk into one of the box stores or a specialty house is, what kind of topping, what kind of joint compound do I need? So Darin, talk to us about the confusion around what kind of topping, what kind of compound do I like to use as a do-it-yourselfer compared to what you like to use as somebody who slings hundreds of pounds of this stuff?
Yeah, I think if you're doing a relatively small area you're working with, all-purpose is going to serve you just fine. Not as much glue in it, so you just got to make sure you're getting plenty of mud behind your tape, letting it dry.
Talk about that. People don't realize, I didn't used to realize, the mud behind the tape was at least as important as the mud in front of the tape.
Yeah, especially when you're taping with a paper tape, a drywall tape type deal, when you're trying to glue it down, essentially that's what you're doing. You're gluing it to the gypsum. You need a thin mixture, but a thin mixture is easy to wipe out from behind the tape.
Oh.
So thin it so it adheres, that activates that glue. And the all-purpose taped lots of jobs with it. As I learned through experience, in bigger jobs, it doesn't hold moisture. You're better off using a little more specified taping mud.
On bigger jobs where you've got
jobs,
miles of it spread out in front of you and you're trying to come back and catch it.
Holds the moisture, and that particular blue dot is a lot of glue. It's essentially glue.
Okay.
And it doesn't sand. It's pretty hard.
When it gets hard, it's hard.
You don't want to leave it where you don't want it.
Now, it's not as hard as hot mud.
No, it's definitely
But
different
it's-
hard mud, but
it's hard to
you're getting
sand.
there. Yeah, you're not going to probably.
And so what people ought to be thinking about is the little plastic tubs, 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever they are, and a small enough knife to get in there. And
Sure. Yeah, and don't be afraid to add a little moisture to it.
Oh, okay.
The more easier it is to, not so much that it's going to fall over the floor, but it's workable. Make it workable. A little moisture goes a long ways. Okay, so deal is, start small and then think big, right? Don't get so far out in front of yourself that you can't clean up the mess. And that is, let me tell you, the voice of experience right there.
Morning, Darin.
Morning, sir.
Jim Allen's backing in here to shoot the texture onto these walls. Darin has prepped it beautifully, and Jim's working late. I mean, he is after hours. I don't know how many hours he shot today, but he squeezed in just what we need, because tomorrow the head unit on the AC is going to be installed, and so the timing is perfect. These guys get me out of trouble all the time. We've got the ductless mini split rough in covered up. All of the low voltage and high voltage boxes are protected. So you've probably been on jobs, I know I've been on jobs that are just a mess, because none of the subcontractors clean up their own work. They never pick up what they leave. They leave their beer cans and their cigarette butts and the extra material, and it's a shipwreck, and it's demoralizing, and it always costs somebody money. But one of the reasons that I love using Jim Allen and Darin Sutton is they clean up their mess. If you look around this job, there's not one piece of drywall, not one scrap. Jim's up there busily scraping the stairs and cleaning up the parts of the floor that need to be cleaned up after he sprayed it. And you can tell a lot about the type of work a guy does generally if you do nothing more than follow him around to a job that he's finished and see whether or not he actually cleaned up his mess. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.